It's the Walter Ostlie question and answer show. You ask them, I answer them. Walter Ostlie question and answer. Hey, Walter here, doing what I can to make comics easier because it shouldn't be overwhelming or daunting to tell your story. And today we're doing something a little bit different. And if my theme song wasn't clear enough, I'm going to be answering some questions that I got from you guys. And maybe this is something we can do on a more regular basis, maybe monthly, depending on how many questions I get. So feel free to ask questions in the community section, which I just found out about, or on videos, and I will answer them. If they're more complicated questions, I might end up just shooting an entire video for them. But let's go ahead and get started with these questions. So we're gonna get started with Chariot 8X, who was the person that actually gave me the idea to do these because they asked a few questions. So let's go ahead and get started with the first question, which is, what is a canvas creator? A canvas creator is just anybody who uploads their comic to Webtoon. It is a free platform to host your comic. They're gonna host your comic for you, deal with all that service network crap that you probably don't wanna deal with yourself because it's a huge pain in the butt. It's free to upload and you don't really get paid directly for that. There is an ad revenue share program, but I'll probably talk about that later. All right, second question. What does it mean to be featured? You talk about being featured, but I'm not sure what that means and what the benefits of it. So a featured creator is what they now call an original creator or original series. And basically that means Webtoon's going to pay you every time you upload one of your comics. So there's a contracted fee that they will give you for the episodes that they publish. So it's kind of a guaranteed paycheck in a way for being able to have the rights to publish your comic online. Now the amount of rights that you get or give up is going to depend on your contract. So if you get the opportunity to be an original series, make sure you look over that comic. And on top of that, you also get the ad revenue share with being an original creator. 3, is posting a comic on Webtoon free, or is there a price? There is no price. You can post your comic up there for free and you retain all your rights. 4, what kind of comics are on Webtoon? Do they have to be colored? Can they be in black and white manga? All kinds of different comics, all different types of genres, color, black and white, abstract, I'm sure they're probably up there. So you can upload any kind of comic you want to Canvas. There are no rules. It could be a 1 episode, 1 and done comic. It could be a 3-panel gag strip. It could be a really long form story. There are no restrictions on the type of story or the art style for uploading to Canvas. What Canvas dimensions and file sizes do we need to have? I noticed the comic pages on Webtoon are extremely long strips. I wondered what dimensions and DPI resolutions is used. So this is kind of confusing to a lot of people. The restrictions for the file dimensions on Webtoon are 800 by 1280 pixels. But you can upload several files, which generates the really long 800 by 10,000 pixels or 20,000 pixels, whatever it is. There is a size limit on the amount of files total size, which is 20 megabytes. That's a really big number. And I think you can get up to, like 100, 150 panels, depending on how big your panels are within that 20 meg limit. And a single episode doesn't need to be that big. If you see yourself kind of crouching in on that panel limit, then you might want to chuck that back and make that 2 episodes or 3 episodes. A lot of original series are anywhere from like 40 to 50 to 60 panels, so there's no reason to go crazy with an episode. Just make it 2 episodes and people can read those 2 episodes. How are comics classified on Webtoon? Are there any specific types of comics that get more views? This is really hard to say, and it's going to really depend on the comic and how hard the creator pushes it. There's all kinds of sci-fi, thriller, romance, drama. It's all over the place. There's a category for everything: comedy, slice of life. So, just pick the category that's right for you. I wouldn't try to focus on making a comic that more people like, because eventually if you don't really like that, you're not gonna enjoy making the comic, and because making comics are so hard, you really need to love what you do. So think about what you like. If you have multiple ideas that kind of go across multiple genres, then sure, go ahead and go onto Webtoon, look at the different categories and see which comics tend to have the more likes. But like I said, it's going to vary a lot. So I wouldn't really worry about that too much. Just worry about what you want to do. What story do you have that really excites you? Because you're going to need that excitement to carry you through the entire comic. Can I rate my comics according to the age group that is appropriate for? On Webtoon, you can't currently do that. What you can do is set your comic as mature, which means, you know, they're going to get a little warning when they go to your comic for the first time that says, hey, this has mature content. Do you want to continue? And so that's one way of kind of blocking it, but it's very much just a like cut. You can't say like, okay, this is for 12 to 13, this is for 20 to 21. You just have that one checkbox that says it's mature or not mature. Can I print comics that I've posted on Webtoon later on? Yes, if you are a Canvas creator, a Canvas series, you can do whatever you want with your comic. You can print it right away. You could have it printed before you upload it. You could have it published if you wanted to. You can do whatever you want with your Canvas series. Do users have the option to delete their comic from Webtoon if they choose so in the future? Yes, you keep all your rights. You can delete it. You could re-upload it. You could keep doing that, you know, 5 times a day if you wanted to. If you're a Canvas creator, that comic is 100% yours. You get to do whatever you want with it. If you're an original creator, of course, it's going to depend on the contract and what you agree to with Webtoon, and that's going to vary from contract to contract. So if you get the opportunity, read your contract, talk to a lawyer. What do I need to make a Webtoon account? You don't really need anything to make a Webtoon account. I guess access to the internet and some kind of device to access the internet. You do have to be at least 13 years old, and I think if you're under 18 years old, you need a parent's permission. But other than that, yeah, you don't really need much to create a Webtoon account. If you want to start getting the ad revenue share, you probably need a bank account or a Patreon account. I can't remember exactly how they pay out the money that you earn from ad revenue share. What are some things that you like about using Webtoon? Webtoon's a really awesome platform. Like I said, they host your comic for free, which is really nice. There's a large readership on Webtoon that are always looking for new comics. So they're hungry for comics. So it is a good place to put your comic because there are people already there looking for comics. I like playing with the vertical format. It is very different than what I'm used to because I'm used to drawing traditional print comics and being locked into a page. So it's interesting playing around and experimenting with what you can do with the infinite vertical scroll. And it just, you know, it's just easy to upload to Webtoon. I think it's a great platform. I think I love webcomics. I think webcomics are a really great way, a path for comic creators to get their comics out there. So yeah, there's just a ton of great things about Webtoon. I don't know if there's anything really bad that I can say about Webtoon. You are constrained to that vertical scroll format. So I know a lot of creators kind of miss having like huge double page spreads or like wide scenic shots and stuff, but there are ways to work around that for Webtoon, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. All right, so those were all the questions from Chariot. So Chariot, thank you for all those questions. I hope they helped. But now let's go look at some of the other questions I got from my community post. All right, this one is from Mark Allen, and he says, how many episodes do you recommend loading to Webtoon when you are first starting? What gives a safe cushion? So when a original series posts, and this is what the pros are doing, this is what Webtoon recommends for the series that they're paying for, right? So they recommend starting off with 3 episodes. That's enough episodes to get people interested. And then the other good thing about having 3 episodes is when somebody reads those first 3 episodes, I believe Webtoon asks them if they want to subscribe now. So they're kind of prompting the user to subscribe if they like those 3 episodes. So I would suggest the same thing. It's going to depend on your story a little bit. If your story is a little bit slower and it takes a little bit longer to get to that hook, you might have to post more episodes. So you kind of have to look at your story and be like, okay, this is the moment where people are going to be like, holy crap, like I need to keep reading this story. And if that's episode 5, you might have to post up to episode 5. So it's going to depend on your story, but usually like around 3 is good enough. And if you're trying to create a buffer so that just in case, you know, something happens, like you have to take a break for whatever reason and you can't draw, you have a buffer of episodes, like a bank of episodes that you can load, and you go through that buffer. And that's going to depend on your life, like how hectic is your life. If your life is really hectic and your schedule's always changing, you're going to need a bigger buffer. If your schedule is pretty irregular, you won't need as large of a buffer. So you can kind of think about it as if it takes you 2 weeks to create an episode, then something might happen that throws you off of your schedule for 4 weeks. If that is something that you know could happen, or you're going to take a 4-week vacation, which if you are, congratulations, that is freaking awesome. 4 weeks would be a blessing. Then you know you need to have at least 3 episodes worth of buffer, because you know that buffer will fill in that gap of 4 weeks that you're taking off, and then you have 1 little extra for safety. So you kind of have to think about your life, your schedule, and how long it takes you to create comics to determine what your buffer should be. All right, Cactus says, or asks, how do you manage your time and keep a consistent schedule in order to meet a deadline? So this is very personal. Also, you need to know what your life is, you need to know what your schedule looks like, and you need to have an idea of how long it takes you to do certain things. How long does it take you to write an episode, draw an episode, color an episode, letter an episode? And so you need to kind of know all these things, or at least have an idea of that, so that you can make a realistic schedule. Because if you don't know those things, you might make an unrealistic schedule that there's no way that you could stay on track, and that's going to become very demoralizing, and it's going to make you not want to do comics. It's going to make you feel like you failed for some reason, and that's just not true. Life happens, and you can't always stick to your schedule. So you need to think of a realistic schedule that you can keep, and if you fall behind, it won't be super hard to catch back up to that schedule. And so when you have a realistic schedule, it's really easy to stay on track. And the way my schedule looks is pretty much like, you know, I print out a calendar for the month, and so I have all the days, and I know that I need to draw pages 1 through 5 this week. And so that means I know, you know, on Monday I got to do page 1, and so on and so forth. And so I put all that stuff on there so I can easily look and be like, okay, today is the 15th. Am I on page 15? If I'm not, I know I'm behind schedule. I have to work extra hard to catch up to that. If I'm ahead of schedule, then I know I can take it a little bit easier, relax a little bit, have more fun with it, or maybe go watch a movie or something. So you've got to really figure out your realistic schedule for your particular life and how you work. Shirley Engel asks, what is the perfect length for an episode when you have 800 by 1280 pixels canvas? How many do you normally use? So there is no perfect length. It's going to depend on your script. But like I said earlier, it's going to, I would say, go around like 40 to 60 panels. I think that is enough content to keep a reader happy from 1 week to the next, but also not to be too long where it feels like a drag to scroll through the entire thing. And of course, there are comics out there that have 100 panels and people love them. So, you know, kind of figure out what works with your readership, what works with your story. If you need 100 panels to get through a particular scene, then go ahead and do that. You know, if you only need 15 panels to get through a particular scene, that might be too small. You might want to bring in a scene from the next episode to kind of, you know, buff up that particular episode. And with the 800 by 1280 pixels, that can vary. My suggestion for a normal panel, just a regular talking panel, is probably about 500 to 600 pixels tall. That seems like a good amount to me because it'll show up really well on a phone and on a computer monitor, but every once in a while you'll have a taller panel that could stretch across that entire 1280 pixels. It's really going to vary depending on what is in the panel and what's going on. But I would say 40, 50, 60 panels is a good number. Alicia Khan asks, any idea how they'll judge the contestants? Well, they say on their website exactly how they're going to judge it. It's 40% how well you stuck to blowing their minds or melting their hearts. Another 30% for how well the story is told, the pacing, the storytelling, all that stuff. And then the final 30% is the audience interaction. And I talked about this in another video that I posted recently about what I think all that really means. And basically it just means most of it's going to be on how well you told your story. Did you blow their minds? Did you melt their hearts? And was your story easy to understand, or did they get confused while they're reading? They weren't sure what a certain thing was, and that's going to make up the bulk of how they judge your comic. And then of course the next thing is going to be the audience interaction. But I think, some of that's going to be like, how well are the audience rating your comic? And so, for rating your comic, it doesn't really matter how many views you get. If you only get one view, that person rates your comic a 10. Your comic has a rating of 10, so I think that's going to come into play. Hopefully you have more than one reader. They say views are going to come into play, but they're also going to gauge the interaction in a scaled ratio or a weighted ratio, whatever that means. But I talked about it in the other video also. If you only have 100 views but you have 100 comments, that's really good interaction. If you have 1,000,000 views but only 100 comments, you have just as many comments, but the percentage of interaction is way lower. So I think, just make your comic as good as you can. You can't really control audience engagement. Yes, once you post your comic, you want to share it. Tell people about it as much as you can. Try to get people interested. Don't feel bad about spamming your comic. You need to keep telling people. It's really hard to get the word out there, so you have to keep screaming it every day, every few hours or whatever. So don't feel bad about that. Just make a great comic and tell as many people as you can. Crazy for Myself asks, how did you learn your drawing? What art school did you go to? I learned from books and from copying other artists. If I had to recommend some books, I would say Andrew Loomis, Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, Perspective for Comic Artists, and Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. And that's really all I would recommend as far as reading for comics. I'm really bad about studying. I had those books and I mostly just skimmed through them because I'm super impatient and I just want to draw. The other thing I did a lot was find my favorite artists, and I would just recreate their drawings exactly, try to be a Xerox copy machine, just look at their drawing and draw, try to repeat it. Once I did that for a while, I would start looking at specific elements from different artists. Maybe I like this artist's eyes, the way he drew eyes, and the way this other artist drew hands, and I would just start redrawing, the hands from those comics, or redrawing the eyes from this guy's comics. And I did that for a while. I probably did a lot of study. I drew a lot for the first year, 2 years that I was learning to draw. And then after that point, I got bored, so I just started making my own comics and learning how to do certain things as I went, because it was kind of like on-the-job training as opposed to being kind of theoretical, this is how you draw a hand. I had to draw hands every single panel across hundreds and hundreds of pages. I learned how to draw the hand because of that, but I wasn't really studying, so it felt more fun. As far as art school, I never went to art school. I'm not big into school. I don't enjoy school, so I never went. Plus it's really expensive. So yeah, I didn't go to art school. Wendy Aurelio asks, I'm interested in knowing what your schedule is like to organize yourself when doing a Webtoon. I know you talked about it in the last video about the Webtoon contest, but possibly could you show what the process would look like per week? So this is going to be very specific, like I said, to your schedule, but for me, I kind of have an idea of how long it takes me to draw. I can do anywhere from 1 page to I've gone up to 4 or 5 pages in a day, just doing the drawing part of it, not coloring. So I know that's what my schedule looks like. I try to make my schedule more realistic, where I do 1 page a day. And so if I'm feeling energized, I can do more than 1 page a day to get ahead of schedule. And so basically, like I said, I just take my calendar, I see when my deadline is. It's 4 weeks away. I have 20 pages to do, so I split that up across the 4 weeks. So if 20 pages split across 4 weeks is 5 pages, I do week 1, 1 through 5, 6 through 10, whatever, you can figure out the math. But I basically break it up that way, and it's all about staying consistent. I wake up in the morning, I make my coffee, I have my breakfast, and then I sit down and I start drawing. There's no questions about oh, when do I do this, when do I do that. That's what I do every single day. And that's me. I do comics full time, so I have that as an option. But before I was full-time, I had a full-time job for, years and years and years. And so what I would do is I would wake up early. I'd wake up 2 hours early so that I could draw for a while before I went to work. I would come home, draw a little bit till dinner, hang out with the family, and then draw until I went to bed. And so I gave up a lot of stuff. Making comics is all about sacrifice. So you kind of have to figure out what your schedule is, be honest with yourself, and kind of work around that. And the speed that I work at is not the speed you work at. The amount of time I have isn't the amount of time you have. So just be honest with yourself, see where you're spending your time, how much time can you devote or want to devote to comics, and then build your schedule around that. Oh man, there's a lot of questions. It's more than I thought. All right. Kareem Yona, sorry if I mispronounced that, asked, do you know how to put your own art facial textures on 3D models or a way to major customization your 3D models? I have no idea. I don't use the 3D models in Clip Studio. I would be surprised if you couldn't look on the Clip Studio 3D store, warehouse, or whatever and find the type of model you're looking for. I think you're looking for a model with an actual face, unlike their kind of blank mannequin models, but still is clothless so you can see all the muscles. I'm assuming that's gotta be on the Clip Studio website. Otherwise, there's a website I like to use called sketchfab.com. It has all different kinds of 3D models that you can rotate around and look at on their website for free. Of course, you can also buy these 3D models and then import them into your drawing program if you want. But I just like looking at it on their website and kind of getting an idea of what the pose looks like. They have cars, they have animals, they have warriors, they have heads, they have all kinds of stuff on there. Ducks, I'm sure, probably motorcycles, airplanes. So yeah, sketchfab.com is a good place to go just to kind of get an idea of the facial structure. And if you need to import it into Clip Studio or Photoshop or whatever, you can buy those models and download them and use them at that point, I think. Something like that. I haven't done it, but yeah, sketchfab.com. Okay, Nan asks, I would like to know about how you manage your time, how long it takes you to create an episode, the sort of timeline and schedule stuff. Also, how to write dialogue, arguments, establish different relationships through dialogue. Okay, so I've talked about the schedule a few times. You basically got to figure out how long it takes you to do stuff and then build your schedule around that. And then you have to be honest with yourself about your schedule. If you get into a funk and you just don't feel like drawing, or something happens with your life, or whatever, that's going to put you behind schedule. That's fine. Don't feel bad about that. Rework your schedule to something a little bit more realistic. Now, if you are just because you decided to go hang out with friends or play video games, which there's nothing wrong with, you just have to be honest about yourself, to yourself about that, and realize why you're falling behind schedule. And if you need to make more time to play video games or hang out with friends or hang out with family, or do important things, or you got to work more hours at your job, that's fine. Just rearrange your schedule, but you just have to pay attention to it, tweak it. You're going to start getting faster at drawing. You might start getting less time. So just rework it, pay attention to it, be honest with yourself, and figure it out. As far as writing dialogue, I talked about this in a different video, and I could have swore somebody else asked me this question about dialogue. But the best way to create good dialogue is to say it out loud. You're going to realize what sounds natural, what's not going to sound natural. So as opposed to just typing it on the page and thinking everything's fine, say it out loud, act it out, become your characters. And if it sounds right to you, it's probably going to sound right to your reader. If it sounds weird to you, it's definitely going to sound weird to your reader. And then as far as making, stuff about relationships, have conversations with people that you wouldn't normally talk to, talk to somebody at school or at a bar or at the coffee house, whatever, or just eavesdrop on conversations and see how other people talk to other people, because you kind of get stuck in a rut when you only talk to your friends or watch the same TV shows. So the more you experience as a person, the better you will be as a writer, unless you're just really creative. But yeah, so just enjoy experiences, listen to other people, pay attention to how they talk and how they emote, with their emotions. And also with dialogue, a lot of it comes into, body motions, like I'm doing this. So when you're drawing, think about that stuff too. It's going to make the dialogue feel more believable as opposed to having a stiff character deliver a really meaningful dialogue or a line. If I'm standing here saying, I love you, like that's nothing. But if I'm like, I love you, that's a little bit more emotional. So think about that when you're drawing as well for storytelling and character acting. Rissa Ann asks, how do you get your comic noticed? This is really hard. Everybody struggles with this. I still struggle with this. It goes for anything, music, my YouTube videos. Like, how do I get more people to notice my YouTube videos or read my comics or follow me on Instagram? It's basically all about consistency. So it's really hard to get a new reader, a new subscriber. It's tough. So when you do actually get a new subscriber or whatever, let's just say follower, you want to make sure you keep them. And the best way to keep them is by delivering what they came from originally. So if they came to your comic and you had 40 panels and the art looked like this and the story was about this and you're posting every week, they're going to stick around. But if all of a sudden you're like, no, I'm going to take 4 weeks off and then I'll come back for one episode, then I'm taking another 3 weeks off, or I'm going to change the story, or I'm going to change this thing, or like I'm going to rename the characters, or I'm going to start all over, you start confusing your follower and they're going to kind of forget about whatever it is you're doing. So you got to stay consistent with yourself. And I say consistent, but not so much as, I don't want to say quality because I don't like that word when it comes to artwork. Your comic doesn't have to look like whatever you think is the most awesome artwork out there. It just has to stay, it's got to stay consistent. It's got to be true to you, and you have to be enjoying what you do. And as long as you stay true to that, it's going to remain consistent. Same thing goes for your schedule and all that stuff. All right, so Zanae McBride asks, how do you match the mood of the panel to the script? Also, does the color theory apply just panel to panel or more effective for the whole episode? So matching the art style to the script is something a lot of people struggle with. Usually you have the script and then you find an artist that matches that script. Now, if you're writing and drawing your own script, of course you want to stay true to yourself when you're writing and to your art style. For example, I wrote a script that was like kind of a really dark horror thriller, but if you know my artwork, it's pretty fun and bright. So it didn't really groove, and I was trying to be something that I wasn't and trying something new, and it just looked weird. So you kind of have to think about who you are and the voice you have. That's not to say that you can't tweak what your art style looks like. I did try to spend some time working on my art style to make it a little bit darker, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't fun for me, and I wanted to go back to drawing something fun because I like being silly, I like being ridiculous. So you kind of have to think about that when you're writing and what your art style looks like and who you are as a person. As far as color theory can be panel to panel. It can be for the entire episode. I usually like to think about it as a particular scene. I like to think about the mood, the color of that particular scene. Is it sad and blue? Is it energetic and red? Is it, vibrant and yellow? And I keep that same color palette across that entire scene. And then when it switches to another scene, I change the mood of the color then. But that's just how I do it. There's no reason why you couldn't change it from panel to panel. You just got to make sure that you realize that that could be confusing to the reader if things keep jumping back and forth. It could be really exciting, but it could also be confusing, or it could be neither. So you kind of just have to play with it, think about what you're doing, show it to other people. There's not anything wrong with getting feedback from other people on what they think, like how they think it looks, and that can help guide you, because eventually you're going to put the comic out and people are going to see it. So you might as well find some people that you trust their opinion, other people you admire or look up to their artwork, and then just ask their opinion and see what they think. Krusty Butler asks, any tips for writing realistic dialogue? I think if you're going to write realistic dialogue, you have to read your dialogue out loud. You have to act it out and see what actually works. Like, does it sound right in your head? If it doesn't sound right in your head or when you're speaking it out loud, it's definitely going to sound weird to the person reading it on the paper. I think it's easier to make stuff look okay on the paper because you're thinking about it, but when you start saying it out loud, you really start hearing weird quirks, or kind of talking statically or staccato, where it's kind of hard to read. There's no natural flow to it. So definitely act out your dialogue when you're writing it down, and then tweak it based on how it sounds when you're talking it. See, that would be horrible. Okay, that's it for this session. That was a lot of questions. Thank you everybody for asking your questions. Maybe we'll be able to do this again, like maybe you can do it monthly, depending on how many questions we get out there. Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of talking. So hopefully you guys found that useful. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this. If you have questions you would like to ask, you can always leave them on the videos I post, and I'll try to keep track of them. Or I will do another community post, maybe with a little bit more forewarning as opposed to just the night before. Maybe I'll post it a week ahead of schedule and then let a week of questions come in, and then I will do the video when that fills up with enough questions to do the video. Hopefully less than this. I don't know how many questions that was, but it was a lot. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want to keep making comics easier, make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch another video for more sweet, sweet goodness. Peace.